The scar across Eleanor Vaughn's left cheek had been a gift from her stepmother, along with the words that would echo in her mind for the next decade. "No man will ever want damaged goods like you." Eleanor pressed her fingers against the rough wooden counter of the mercantile in Oro Blanco, Arizona, counting out the meager coins she'd earned from washing dishes at the Silver Star Saloon. The year was 1878, and the desert town shimmered under an unforgiving July sun. She'd arrived 3 weeks ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart that had learned to expect rejection. At 22 years old, she'd survived more than most people twice her age, but survival and living were two entirely different things. "That'll be $2 for the flour and sugar, Miss Vaughn," Mr. Henderson said, his eyes kind despite the pity she could see lurking there. Everyone in town had heard her story by now, how she'd fled Kansas after her stepmother's cruelty had escalated beyond verbal abuse, how she'd worked her way southwest, taking whatever job she could find, saving every penny to put distance between herself and the past. "Thank you," Eleanor murmured, gathering her purchases. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped into the heat, and she nearly collided with a solid wall of muscle and worn leather. "Whoa there," a deep voice said, and strong hands steadied her shoulders. Eleanor looked up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a dusty Stetson. The man stood well over 6 feet tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. "You all right, miss?" Eleanor stepped back quickly, her hand instinctively moving to cover her scarred cheek. It was an automatic response now, one she barely noticed anymore. "I'm fine. Excuse me." "Wait," the cowboy said, and something in his voice made her pause. It wasn't demanding or harsh. It was almost gentle. "You're new in town, aren't you? I'm Isaac Vaughn. I run the ranch about 5 miles north of here." The coincidence of the shared surname wasn't lost on either of them, and Isaac's mouth quirked in an almost smile. "Any relation?" "Not that I know of," Eleanor said, trying to edge past him. She didn't like the way her heart had started beating faster, or how his gaze seemed to see right through the walls she'd built. "Isaac, quit bothering the lady and help me load these supplies," another voice called out. A younger man, perhaps 19 or 20, emerged from the mercantile with a sack of grain on each shoulder. He had the same blue eyes as Isaac, though his face was rounder, less weathered. "This is my brother Jasper," Isaac said, ignoring Jasper's comment. "We're always looking for help at the ranch if you're interested in honest work. Pays better than the saloon, I'd wager." Eleanor's spine stiffened. "The saloon pays just fine and the work is honest. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Vaughn." She walked away before he could respond, her cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. She didn't need charity, especially not from some rancher who probably felt sorry for the scarred woman new to town. The scar didn't define her, even though it seemed to be the first thing everyone noticed. But as the days passed, Eleanor found herself thinking about Isaac Vaughn more than she cared to admit. He came into town every few days, always with Jasper or one of his ranch hands, always tipping his hat to her when their paths crossed. He never mentioned the job offer again, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Eleanor was leaving the saloon after her evening shift when 3 drunk miners stumbled out behind her. The sun had set an hour ago, and the street was dark except for the lights spilling from various establishments. "Hey there, pretty lady," one of them slurred, reaching for her arm. Eleanor jerked away, but another one blocked her path. "Come on, don't be unfriendly. We just want some company." "Leave me alone," Eleanor said firmly, her heart pounding. She'd dealt with drunk men before, but these three had a mean edge to them that made her nervous. "What's wrong? That scar make you think you're too good for us?" The third one sneered, and Eleanor felt the old shame wash over her even as anger flared in her chest. "The lady said to leave her alone." Isaac's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. He stepped into the light, and Eleanor had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. He wasn't wearing his usual easy expression. His jaw was set, his eyes hard as flint. "I suggest you boys head home before you do something you'll regret." "This ain't your business, Vaughn," one of the miners protested, but he was already backing up. Isaac had a reputation in Oro Blanco as a fair man, but not one to be crossed. "When someone bothers a lady on my watch, it becomes my business. Now move along." The miners grumbled but scattered, and Eleanor found herself alone with Isaac in the pool of light. Her hands were shaking, and she clasped them together to hide it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Can I walk you home?" Isaac asked, his tone back to that gentleness that made her chest tighten. "Just to make sure you get there safe." Eleanor wanted to refuse. She wanted to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need anyone. But the truth was, she was shaken, and the small room she rented above the general store suddenly seemed very far away. "All right," she said. They walked in silence for a while, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust in the street. The night air was cooler than the day but still held the warmth of the desert sun. "Why are you kind to me?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "Most people either pity me or avoid looking at me altogether." Isaac stopped walking and turned to face her. "Why would I pity you?" "Don't pretend you don't see it," Eleanor said, dropping her hand from where it had automatically risen to cover her scar. "Everyone sees it. I see a woman who's strong enough to leave behind whatever hurt her and start fresh in a new town," Isaac said simply. "I see someone who works hard and doesn't ask for handouts. And yes, I see a scar. But that's about fifth or sixth on the list of things I notice about you." Eleanor's breath caught. "What else do you notice?" "I notice that you have the prettiest green eyes I've ever seen, the color of spring grass after a rain. I notice that you're always polite to Mr. Henderson even when he's being long-winded. I notice that you tip your head to the side when you're thinking. I notice that your smile, on the rare occasions you let it show, could light up this whole town." "You shouldn't say things like that," Eleanor whispered, but she couldn't look away from him. "Why not, if they're true?" "Because I'm not the kind of woman men say those things to." "Who told you that?" Isaac's voice had gone hard again, but this time the anger wasn't directed at her. "My stepmother. My father by his silence. Every man who ever looked at me with disgust after she marked me." Eleanor was surprised by her own honesty, but something about Isaac made her want to be truthful. "She told me I'd never be enough, that I was ruined." Isaac stepped closer, and in the dim light from a nearby window, his eyes blazed with an intensity that made her heart race. Then she was wrong. "You're more than enough for me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Eleanor wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt, but years of rejection had taught her to be cautious. "You don't even know me," she said. "Then let me know you. Have dinner with me tomorrow. Come out to the ranch. Let me show you what I'm building out there." "Why?" Eleanor asked, the question barely more than a breath. "Because from the moment I saw you, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. Because I want to know everything about you. Because I think you and I might be something special together, if you'll give us a chance." Eleanor stood at a crossroads, and she knew it. She could walk away, keep her walls up, stay safe in her isolation. Or she could take a leap of faith with this cowboy who looked at her like she was something precious. "Okay," she said finally. "Tomorrow." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was worth every ounce of fear in her heart. The next day, Eleanor borrowed a horse from the livery and followed Isaac's directions north out of town. The landscape was stunning in its harsh beauty, all red rock and scrub brush under an endless blue sky. She understood why he loved it out here, away from the noise and judgment of town. The Vaughn ranch came into view after about 40 minutes of riding. It wasn't the biggest spread Eleanor had seen, but it was well maintained. A sturdy wooden house stood at the center, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape, and she could see several ranch hands working near the barn. Isaac emerged from the house as she approached, and Eleanor's breath caught at the sight of him. He'd cleaned up, trading his dusty work clothes for a pressed shirt and clean trousers, though he still wore his boots and hat. He helped her dismount with an easy strength that made her very aware of his hands on her waist. "Welcome," he said, his smile warm. "I'm glad you came." "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Eleanor admitted. "Old habits are hard to break." "What changed your mind? Curiosity, maybe, or hope? I'm not sure which." Isaac led her inside, and Eleanor was immediately struck by how comfortable the house felt. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well organized, with solid furniture and curtains on the windows. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and she could imagine it roaring with warmth during the winter months. "Did you build this yourself?" she asked. "Most of it. Jasper and I came out here 4 years ago with almost nothing. Our parents died of fever back in Texas, and there wasn't anything left for us there. We worked cattle drives for 2 years, saved every penny, and finally had enough to buy this land and start building." Pride colored his voice, and Eleanor understood. This was more than just a ranch. It was proof that he could create something lasting. "It's impressive," she said honestly. "It's lonely," Isaac replied, and the admission surprised her. "Jasper's a good brother, and the men who work for me are decent enough. But at the end of the day, when I sit out on that porch and watch the sun set, I can't help but think about sharing it with someone." Eleanor walked to the window, looking out at the land stretching toward the horizon. "I've never really had a home," she said quietly. "My mother died when I was 7. My father remarried a year later, and from that moment on I was in the way, an inconvenience. My stepmother made sure I knew it every single day." "How did you get the scar?" Isaac asked gently, coming to stand beside her. Eleanor's hand rose to touch it, feeling the raised line of tissue that ran from her temple to her jaw. "I was 12. I broke one of her good plates by accident while washing dishes. She grabbed the poker from the fireplace and struck me. My father was there. He saw it happen. He did nothing." The old pain welled up, but it felt different telling Isaac, less shameful, more like a burden shared. "She told me while I was lying there bleeding that no man would ever want damaged goods. That I should learn my place and be grateful for whatever scraps of affection anyone threw my way." "Where is she now?" Isaac's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I don't know. I don't care. I left 2 years ago on my 18th birthday. I've been moving ever since, taking work where I could find it, trying to outrun the voice in my head that says she was right." Isaac turned her gently to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Eleanor. What was done to you was evil and wrong. You didn't deserve it. You don't deserve to carry that shame, and anyone who can't see how remarkable you are doesn't deserve a moment of your time." Tears burned in Eleanor's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You barely know me. How can you say these things? I know that you're brave. Coming to a new town alone, starting over, that takes courage. I know you're proud, maybe too proud sometimes, but I respect that. I know you work hard and don't complain. I know that when you laugh, which isn't often enough, it's the best sound I've ever heard." He paused, his thumbs tracing small circles on her shoulders. "And I know that when I'm near you, Everything feels right in a way it hasn't in a long time. I'm scared, Eleanor whispered. I'm scared to believe you. I'm scared of what happens if I let myself trust you and you turn out to be like everyone else. Then be scared with me, Isaac said, because I'm terrified too. Terrified that you'll decide I'm not worth the risk. Terrified that I'll mess this up somehow. But I'd rather be scared and try than safe and alone. Eleanor looked up into his eyes and saw the truth there. He meant every word. Maybe that's what real love was supposed to be, not the absence of fear, but the courage to be vulnerable anyway. Okay, she said. Let's try. The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like sunrise, and when he cupped her cheek, careful and tender, Eleanor didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, and when his lips met hers, soft and questioning, she kissed him back with all the hope she'd been afraid to feel. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. Isaac courted her properly, riding into town to walk her home from work, bringing her wildflowers he picked from the range, taking her on picnics in the shade of ancient cottonwoods. He introduced her to his life, showing her every corner of the ranch, teaching her to ride better, letting her help with small tasks when she wanted to. Jasper took to her immediately, treating her like the sister he'd never had. The ranch hands were respectful and friendly. For the first time, Eleanor felt like she belonged somewhere, but not everyone in Oro Blanco was happy about the developing romance. Mrs. Caroline Hutchinson, the banker's wife and self-appointed guardian of the town's moral standards, made her disapproval known one afternoon when Eleanor was shopping for supplies. "I'm surprised Isaac Vaughn is courting you so openly," Mrs. Hutchinson said, her voice carrying through the store. "He could have his pick of any unmarried girl in the territory. Makes you wonder what he's really after, doesn't it?" Eleanor felt the familiar flush of shame creeping up her neck, but she forced herself to meet the older woman's gaze. "If you have something to say to me, Mrs. Hutchinson, please be direct." "Very well. A man like Isaac doesn't seriously court a woman like you. He's using you for some purpose of his own, and when he's done, you'll be left even more ruined than you already are. If you had any decency, you'd leave town before you embarrass him further." The words hit like physical blows, each one finding the soft places where Eleanor's self-doubt still lived. She opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut in. "Caroline, that's enough." Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife, stepped between them. She was a handsome woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and no-nonsense eyes. "This is neither the time nor the place for your poison. I'm simply trying to protect one of our town's most eligible bachelors from making a terrible mistake," Mrs. Hutchinson sniffed. "What you're doing is showing everyone what a small, cruel person you are," Mrs. Morrison said firmly. "Now leave this girl alone, or I'll make sure your husband hears about how you've been treating customers in his store." Mrs. Hutchinson left in a huff, and Eleanor found herself shaking. Mrs. Morrison touched her arm gently. "Don't listen to her, dear. She's been trying to marry Isaac off to her niece for 2 years. This is jealousy talking, nothing more." "But what if she's right?" Eleanor asked quietly. "What if Isaac realizes he could do better? Better than a woman who makes him smile more than I've seen in years. Better than someone who treats his brother with kindness and his hands with respect. Better than a lady who's shown more courage in a few months than most people show in a lifetime." Mrs. Morrison shook her head. "Isaac Vaughn is a smart man. He knows what he wants. Don't let bitter people make you doubt that." Eleanor carried those words with her like a shield when she rode out to the ranch that evening. Isaac was working in the corral with a young horse, his movements patient and calm. He looked up when he heard her approach, and his whole face lit up. "You're early," he said, climbing over the fence. "Not that I'm complaining. Eleanor dismounted and fell into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage and sun-warmed skin. "Mrs. Hutchinson told me I should leave town before I embarrass you." She felt Isaac go rigid. "She said what?" "It doesn't matter. Mrs. Morrison stood up for me, and I'm choosing to believe you instead of the voice in my head that says she's right." Isaac pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes serious. "Eleanor, I need you to understand something. I don't care what anyone in this town thinks about us. I don't care about their opinions or their gossip. The only thing I care about is you and how you feel about me." "I'm falling in love with you," Eleanor said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "It terrifies me, but it's true." "Good," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I fell in love with you the day I met you, and I've been falling harder every day since." He kissed her then, deep and thorough. And Eleanor let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this happiness. 3 months after their first meeting, Isaac asked Eleanor to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. He didn't have a fancy speech prepared. He simply took her hand and said, "Marry me. Build this life with me. Let me spend every day proving that you're enough. More than enough." Eleanor said yes through happy tears, and when Isaac slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, she felt something shift inside her. The voice that had told her she was worthless, that she was damaged, finally went silent. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Oro Blanco. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Morrison had helped her alter, and Isaac wore his Sunday best. Jasper stood up as best man, and Mrs. Morrison herself gave Eleanor away, since there was no family to do it. Most of the town attended, their initial skepticism apparently overcome by the obvious devotion between the couple. Even Mrs. Hutchinson came, though she sat in the back and left without offering congratulations. The wedding night was tender and sweet. Isaac treated Eleanor like something precious, taking his time, murmuring words of love and praise until she believed every one of them. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt whole in a way she never had before. Life as a rancher's wife was harder than Eleanor had expected, but also more satisfying. She learned to manage the household, to help with the ranch work when needed, to navigate the social expectations of being Mrs. Isaac Vaughn. Isaac was patient with her learning curve, supportive when she struggled, proud when she succeeded. Their first year of marriage wasn't without challenges. There were hard days when the work seemed endless, when money was tight because cattle prices dropped, when Eleanor's old insecurities would rear up unexpectedly. But through it all, Isaac never wavered. He loved her through her doubts, held her when old nightmares made her wake crying, reminded her daily that she was cherished. In the spring of 1880, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. What if she turned out like her stepmother? What if the cycle of abuse continued through her? Isaac found her crying in their bedroom one afternoon, overwhelmed by fear. "What if I don't know how to be a good mother?" she asked. "What if I hurt our child the way I was hurt?" "You won't," Isaac said with absolute certainty. "You know what that pain feels like. You'll move mountains to make sure our children never experience it, and you won't be doing it alone. We'll figure it out together." Their son was born in October, a healthy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel Thomas Vaughn, and Eleanor fell in love all over again, this time with the tiny life she and Isaac had created together. Being a mother transformed something fundamental in Eleanor. As she held Samuel, nursing him or rocking him to sleep, she thought about her own mother, who had died too young. She thought about all the years she'd believed she was worthless, and she made a silent promise to her son that he would never doubt his value, that he would grow up knowing he was loved completely and unconditionally. Isaac was a devoted father, taking Samuel out to see the horses, talking to him constantly even though the baby couldn't understand. Jasper doted on his nephew, carving him toys and telling him elaborate stories. The ranch became a home filled with laughter and love. 2 years later, Eleanor gave birth to twin girls. They named them Rose and Ruby, and the house became even more chaotic and wonderful. Isaac hired additional help, so Eleanor wouldn't be overwhelmed, but she found she loved the busy fullness of her life. These children were proof that she could create something beautiful, that the damage done to her didn't define her future. One evening, when Samuel was 4 and the twins were 2, Eleanor stood on the porch watching her family. Isaac was teaching Samuel to rope a fence post while the girls toddled around collecting rocks and presenting them as treasures. The sun was setting in its spectacular desert fashion, painting everything gold. "You're smiling," Isaac said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm happy," Eleanor said simply. "Truly, completely happy." "You deserve it," Isaac murmured against her hair. "You deserve all of this and more." "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked. "Choosing me when you could have had someone easier, someone without so much baggage." Isaac turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "Eleanor Vaughn, in all the years we've been together, have I ever given you reason to doubt how I feel?" "No," Eleanor admitted. "But sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I get to have this life. Believe it. You're stuck with me for the next 50 years at least. Probably longer if I have anything to say about it." Isaac's smile was tender. "You know what I think about sometimes? I think about that day we met outside the Mercantile. What if you'd walked a different direction? What if I'd been 5 minutes later? We might have missed each other entirely." "But we didn't," Eleanor said, reaching up to cup his cheek. "We found each other. You showed me that I was worth loving. You were always worth loving. I just got lucky enough to be the one who proved it to you." They kissed as the sun completed its descent, and Eleanor felt the last remnants of her old pain finally dissolve. She'd spent so many years believing she'd never be enough, carrying the weight of someone else's cruelty. But Isaac had been right all along. She wasn't just enough. She was exactly who she was meant to be. Over the following years, the Vaughn ranch prospered. Isaac's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and they were able to expand their holdings and hire more permanent hands. Samuel grew into a bright, kind-hearted boy who loved the ranch life. Rose and Ruby were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. In 1885, Eleanor gave birth to another son whom they named Matthew. By then, she'd become a respected figure in Oro Blanco, known for her kindness and her willingness to help families in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be judged and found wanting, so she made it her mission to see the good in people, especially those others overlooked. One afternoon, a young woman arrived in town with a black eye and a terrified expression. She reminded Eleanor so much of herself years ago that she immediately took action. With Isaac's full support, they offered the woman refuge at the ranch until she could get back on her feet. They helped her find work, gave her a safe place to stay, and eventually helped her start a new life in California, far from the husband who'd hurt her. It became a pattern. Over the years, the Vaughn Ranch became known as a place where people down on their luck could find help without judgment. Eleanor and Isaac provided jobs, sometimes temporary shelter, always dignity and respect. They taught their children to value people for who they were, not what they looked like or where they came from. Mrs. Hutchinson never did warm to Eleanor, but her opinion mattered less and less as the years passed. Most of the town had come to see what Isaac had known from the start, that Eleanor was special, strong, and kind. When Samuel was 16, he asked his mother about her scar. She'd never hidden it from her children, but she'd never fully explained it either. They sat together on the porch swing while she told him the truth about her childhood, about the cruelty and pain, about believing she was worthless. "But then your father saw me differently," Eleanor said. "He saw past the scar to the person underneath. He taught me that I was more than what had been done to me." "I'm glad you found each other," Samuel said quietly. "I can't imagine our family any other way." "Neither can I," Eleanor agreed. "And that's the thing about pain, Samuel. Sometimes it can be transformed into something beautiful. The hurt I experienced made me determined to be a better person, a better mother. It gave me empathy for others who are struggling. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade who I've become." It was true. Eleanor had spent years trying to escape her past, but she'd finally learned to integrate it. The scar was part of her story, but it didn't define her. What defined her was how she'd chosen to respond to adversity, how she'd built a life of love and meaning despite everything working against her. In 1890, 12 years after they'd married, Isaac and Eleanor celebrated their anniversary with a quiet dinner while Jasper watched the children. They'd come so far from that first tentative meeting outside the mercantile. They'd built not just a successful ranch, but a real partnership, a true marriage based on mutual respect and deep love. "You remember what I said to you that first night?" Isaac asked, taking her hand across the table. "When you told me what your stepmother had said." "You said I was more than enough for you," Eleanor replied, the memory still vivid after all these years. "I need you to know something," Isaac said seriously. "You're not just enough for me. You're everything. You're my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, the mother of my children. You're the reason I get up excited every morning and the reason I'm grateful every night. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor Vaughn, and I thank God every day that you gave me a chance." Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "You saved me," she said. "You showed me what love was supposed to be. You proved that I deserved good things. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. I love you more than I have words to express." "Then we're even," Isaac said with a smile, "because I love you more than words too." They kissed across the table, the same spark still there after all these years. Eleanor thought about the terrified young woman she'd been, arriving in Oro Blanco with nothing but shame and fear. She thought about how close she'd come to pushing Isaac away, to believing the lies she'd been told about her worth. And she thought about the woman she'd become: confident, loved, valued. A wife, a mother, a pillar of her community. Someone who'd taken her pain and transformed it into compassion. The years continued to pass in a blur of happy moments. Samuel eventually took over much of the ranch management, showing the same dedication and skill his father had. Rose became a teacher in Oro Blanco, while Ruby married a cattleman and moved to New Mexico. Matthew developed a talent for working with horses and started a successful training business. Eleanor and Isaac grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree branch and flourish. The scar on Eleanor's face faded somewhat with age, becoming just one line among many, a part of her history but no longer the first thing anyone noticed. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Eleanor looked around at all the faces, at the family she and Isaac had built together, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. All of this had started because one cowboy had looked past her scars and seen her worth. Because he'd been brave enough to tell her she was more than enough when she'd believed she was nothing. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Eleanor and Isaac sat on their porch swing, just as they had thousands of times before. The desert night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his arm around her shoulders. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Eleanor said. "How different my life would have been if I hadn't come to Oro Blanco, if I hadn't met you." "I'm the lucky one," Isaac insisted, but Eleanor shook her head. "We're both lucky. We found each other when we needed each other most. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You built me up when the world had torn me down. You made me believe in myself." "You did all that yourself," Isaac said gently. "I just loved you. You're the one who had the courage to heal, to trust, to build this beautiful life. I'm proud of you, Eleanor, so proud." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the warmth of his presence. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, content in the life they'd created together. In that moment, Eleanor finally released the last echo of her stepmother's voice. The words, "You'll never be enough," had no power anymore. They'd been proven wrong by 3 decades of love, by 4 children and a growing number of grandchildren, by a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. She was enough. She'd always been enough. It had just taken the right person to help her see it. As they finally went inside to bed, Isaac paused to kiss her forehead, gentle and sweet. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too," Eleanor replied. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Always," Isaac promised, "for the rest of my life and beyond." And in the warmth of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their love, Eleanor Vaughn finally understood that she hadn't just survived her past, she'd transcended it. She'd built something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. She'd proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that one person's belief could transform a life, that being told you're not enough could never erase the truth that with the right person, you're not just enough, you're everything. The ranch continued to thrive under their care, passing eventually to Samuel and his children. The Vaughn name became synonymous with integrity, kindness, and hard work in Oro Blanco. And at the center of it all was the love story of a scarred woman who'd been told she was worthless, and the cowboy who'd proven her worth every single day, years later, when Eleanor was in her 70s. A young woman arrived at the ranch asking for help. She had bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes, and Eleanor recognized herself in that frightened face. She took the woman in, gave her shelter and hope, and told her the story of how she'd once arrived in Oro Blanco believing she'd never be enough. "But I was enough," Eleanor said, her weathered hand covering the faded scar on her cheek. "I just needed someone to help me see it, and now I'm telling you you're enough too. Whatever has been done to you, whatever has been said to you, it's lies. You're valuable. You're worthy. You deserve love and respect and happiness." The young woman cried, and Eleanor held her, passing on the gift Isaac had given her so many years ago, the gift of being seen, of being valued, of being enough. And when Isaac found them later, his hair silver now but his blue eyes still as warm as ever, he wrapped his arms around both women, and Eleanor knew that this was their legacy. Not just the ranch or their children or their success, but the healing they'd brought to broken people, the love they'd shared so generously, the proof that the past didn't have to define the future. That night, lying in bed beside the man who'd transformed her life, Eleanor felt complete. The girl who'd been scarred and told she was worthless had become a woman who helped others find their worth. The woman who'd been told she'd never be enough had built a life overflowing with love and meaning. "Thank you," she whispered to Isaac in the darkness. "For what?" he murmured sleepily. "For everything. For seeing me, for loving me, for proving them all wrong. Isaac pulled her closer, his hand finding hers in the dark and lacing their fingers together. "You proved them wrong, sweetheart. I just got to be there to watch you bloom." Eleanor smiled in the darkness, her heart full. She'd come to Oro Blanco broken and alone, and she'd found a home, a family, and a love that had healed her deepest wounds. She'd learned that being enough wasn't about perfection or beauty or being undamaged. It was about being exactly who you were meant to be and finding someone who loved you for it. And she was enough. She'd always been enough. It had just taken a cowboy with blue eyes and a kind heart to help her believe it. As sleep claimed her, Eleanor's last thought was one of profound gratitude for the hard journey that had brought her to Oro Blanco, for the courage to stay, for the love that had transformed her, and for the life she'd built from the ashes of her pain. She'd been told she'd never be enough, but the cowboy had said she was more than enough for him, and in believing him, she'd discovered she was more than enough for herself too. That was the greatest gift of all.